myself off the bathroom floor at 4 a.m. on the morning of November 7th and explained to my kids what had happened. I started to get a little bit more vocal than I had been before. And I think like many American women, I had been in these private Facebook groups that had been sort of talking about what was happening on the political scene. And maybe not quite as vocal in other realms as I have been here, or I've been with my friends, or I've been with my family, about my beliefs and my political leanings and the things that I advocate on behalf of. And part of that, I think, came from a big place of fear, right? Like, what are the consequences? What's the blowback to us professionally for taking on more of a vocal voice in favor of our values? And I think from a place of outrage and also really deep sadness, I started after the US election to get a little bit more vocal, using my background as a lawyer and in women's leadership to talk about the real intersection of these things in the United States and globally. But that in and of itself was my experience of stepping into a new role. And as I watched what was happening with other women like Sally Yates, and she was the first person to flag to the Trump administration that there were some strange doings between Russia and the campaign. She was subsequently fired several weeks later when she refused to enforce the Muslim travel ban as the United States Attorney General. She put her job on the line, and she put her career on the line for things that she believed in. And she's but one example of the women that I'm watching every day that have brought me to the topic that I'm going to discuss with you today, which is the rise of the new heroine. Because the qualities of the challenges that we are being called to in our own journey right now as women leaders mirror in many ways the hero's journey itself. We are on a journey as new heroines right now in the global environment that I guarantee you we haven't been on before. And so what I want to share with you today as we go through this are the 12 challenges that I see us as facing right now as new heroines on the rise. Because we are indeed being called to a journey at this moment in time, one that requires us to be more vocal, greater advocates, stronger allies with each other than we've ever been before. And so as I go through these 12 challenges, I'd invite all of you to think about how you are being called in your own lives to a new level of heroism. Where are you ready? Where are you being invited to step forward to become more of what you are meant to be in the first place? Okay, so the first challenge of the new heroine is the challenge of disruption. Everything is interconnected, and the fears that we are sharing at this moment of global disruption are in many ways uniform. But the interesting thing about disruption is that the place of disruption is a place of opportunity. Because when things crumble, what's left in the ashes is fertile soil. So the opportunity that we are being called to and the challenge of this disruption is how we are going to step into the void. And in my mind and in my experience already, that disruption has called me to activism. Activism meets disruption in a place where greater conversations are possible. And if we do not choose to step into this void in new and dynamic ways, the void will eat us alive. And I tried really hard as I was running through this talk, I'll just let you guys know, to not get scary. Like we just survived this weekend in the United States where everybody I know who was living on the West Coast was worried about whether or not they were going to actually wake up the next morning given what was happening in North Korea. But I will tell you that I'm so deeply grounded right now in the idea of action as a counterbalance to disruption. And I do think the stakes right now are very high. I feel like what we are being called to as women leaders is not a small thing. And that's one of the reasons why I even chose to talk about all of this today. The Dalai Lama said Western women will save the world. I happen to think it's women worldwide, not just Western women. But now's the moment, right? Challenge number 2 is courage. And what I said yesterday on my Facebook Live broadcast as I was getting ready to talk to all of you is that I have this image of all of us like pulling on our courage boots when I think about this. Because one of the things that I feel is so important right now is that we come out of the darkness in the conversations of what we believe in. Those hidden little Facebook groups for women's leadership, right, where we're all having conversations about the things that outrage us and that we're living through and the experiences we have day to day on the job, those conversations need to become more public. And we need to start as a collective of women leaders stepping forward and having difficult conversations in ways where they can be heard. Standing back in the shadows now is no longer a viable option for any of us. We need to start stepping into a place where we take ownership of what we believe in and we show it to others. One of the reasons why this is so important is that we also need to be role models. And y'all who were here last year remember me talking about the importance of leading by example. If you can be brave about what you believe in, step forward into your life in greater and stronger ways to advocate for yourself and other women, you will be showing other women coming up behind you how to make a difference in the world. Courage. Bravery, really important. Second challenge on the journey of the new heroine. The third, and I love this one, is connection. Many of us right now with the events that are happening in the world are really scared. Again, here I'm going to try not to get deep drama. But one of the features of this is that many of us have spent a lot of time behind our computers, right? We're kind of like at home typing away. We're hiding in our little bubbles. We're communicating with each other over Facebook, but we're very rarely in environments like this. I personally happen to believe that we all need more of this right now, probably more than we have ever needed it before. We need to be face-to-face with women who are allies. We need to link arms with one another, and we need to be connected. So I want to encourage all of you, when you're thinking also about your own journey and what you're being called to think about the ways that you can create greater connection with other women leaders. What can you be doing in your day-to-day that creates more community? Because isolation, by the way, will kill us. Not just like, literally. I mean, it'll kill us in terms of our ability to move forward as women leaders. We need to establish connection and build it and grow it face-to-face, live, and in person. Connection, third challenge. Fourth challenge, and this happens to be one of my favorites, is the line in the sand. Now, we've heard this expression before, right? That you draw a line in the sand and the kind of message is, you may not cross any further here. I feel like I'm being all Lord of the Rings about this, but like you draw the line in the sand and it's like no further. My view is that the line in the sand as a challenge to the new heroine is not just about drawing the line in the sand politically. Like, we're not going to allow you to roll back our rights, or we're going to commit as a nation to standing on these principles. The thing I think about here, by the way, with regard to Justin Trudeau, is that moment when he came to the White House to meet Donald Trump and he shook his hand, and he did not allow himself to be yanked in the way that Donald Trump does to every other man who intimidates him. He stood his ground. Like Justin Trudeau stood the line, and it was a really raw moment. If you saw the footage of it from the side, it was like, that's the line in the sand, okay? So that's the line in the sand politically. Like, you don't get to go any further than this, okay? But I think for us as women leaders, the line in the sand is not just a political one. And part of the line in the sand has to be about what we are willing to tolerate in our own personal lives, in our most intimate relationships, in the way that we are treated, in the way that we garner respect or don't, as a means of making the personal political. I'm way back in old school feminism now, you guys, but this is what I'm grounded in. It seems to me, from where I sit right now, that it's going to be very hard for all of us to create a new world together, one that we all want to live in, where autocrats and dictators don't get to run the show and scare the pants off of all of us. It's going to be very hard for us to create that if we don't, in our own personal lives, also draw the line that says no more, right? We can't create a new world that's based on a foundation that is cracked. And so for those of you who are struggling right now, and I know so many women leaders who are in this place, I've been in this place in the last 12 months, with your personal lives and your intimate relationships, and whether or not you're getting what you want and what you need and what you are owed and what you deserve and what you are worthy of. Remember that every gesture that you take on your own behalf, you take for women everywhere. And it is important at this moment in time to stand your ground. That's the line in the sand, personal and professional. It's time. We're worthy of more. Fifth challenge on the road of the new heroine is the challenge of vision. So one of the things that I talk about when I talk about what's happening in the United States from a resistance standpoint is the idea that there's resistance over on this side, which we all need to be doing, right? We all need to be active and vocal and angry and protesting and part of the 4 million women who got out and marched worldwide on January 21st. And if all we are doing is resisting, what we're not doing is creating what's coming next, the future that's coming next for all of us worldwide as women leaders. So vision, having a vision of the world that you want to live in, having a vision of the world that you want to create, whether that's personally, professionally, or globally, because we're all in this together, is a space that we all need to hold. And if we can meet the challenge of creating envisioning, and then taking action from that place, we will be resisting by doing that as well. So vision is a critical aspect of what we're all trying to do right now on a global political front. Challenge number 6, and this one, I have so much fun with these. Like when I ran this talk last night again, I was like, this one's just, it's so juicy. Generosity. And what I mean from this is generosity not just with your dollars, but also generosity with your gifts as an individual and generosity of spirit. And so what I mean by that is that we all come here with certain, let's call it goddess-given gifts, okay? We all come here with certain unique talents and assets. Part of our role, I believe, is to give those back to the greater good, give them back to the collective. It's also about how can you contribute your God-given gifts, your goddess-given gifts, to make the world a better place. How can you be generous with others? How can you share your knowledge? Generosity as a principle has to be part of what we're after when we think about what's coming next. So generosity, the 6th challenge on the path of the new heroine. The 7th challenge, also equally delicious, is the challenge of guardianship. Now, I get a lot of questions all the time about why the name of my company is the Gaia Project for Women's Leadership. Gaia, for those of you who don't know, is another name for the guardian of the earth. She is the goddess of the earth. She is Mother Earth herself. And Gaia is about the principle of guarding what we know. Many of us as women historically have been great guardians of family, of home, of children. What we are being called to right now as new heroines is a greater degree of guardianship. Guardianship of values, guardianship of integrity, guardianship of principles. Once again, this goes hand in hand with here's the line that we're not going to cross, right? And what this means for us, by the way, in business, because all of this applies, I hope you all see, not just in our intimate lives, not just in politics, but also in our working worlds, is the idea that we are guardians of policies and principles that allow women leaders to rise. So when you are confronted with the sexist joke or the sidelong racist comment, are you the person who is the guardian of the space for women who occupy that identity? Or are you allowing that space to be violated? We're guardians now, and our guardianship of these principles and the things that we believe in and ethics and morality are things that we need to commit to every day right now on this path as new heroines. We're guardianship of all that we hold dear, including the planet, by the way. Okay, 8th challenge on the path of the new heroine. This one is near and dear to my heart. It is the challenge of intersectionality. One of the things that I think we all need to think about for those of us who are long-standing feminists and those of us who happen to be white and privileged is the idea that we have not always done our job very well in terms of standing up on behalf of our sisters of color, our sisters in the LGBT community, sisters of other backgrounds and national origins and descents. We have been, as my favorite corporate client likes to say about how they see themselves as not having done their jobs appropriately, in our own swim lanes, right? And in many cases, we have not reached out and held hands and supported women from other communities and identities who, by the way, have borne the brunt of discrimination in ways that some of us who are white and privileged can't even imagine. Like, look at your boards of directors. Are there women of color on your boards of directors? Are there women of perhaps different sexual preference identities on your board of directors? Are there women who represent a broad spectrum in the leadership of the organizations that you're a part of? If not, we need to start taking action on their behalf, on our own behalves. Part of having privilege is that you have the privilege of using your voice. Many other women don't have that privilege. And my view on all of this is that now is the moment where those of us who do have that privilege need to take the opportunity not just to reach out to other women who need our help and our support, but also to listen. Because we have not been open in the past in ways that we need to meeting our sisters who need our support, who are from other backgrounds, at the place where they need our help. It's particularly important, by the way, in my view, given the incredible downturn in public discourse that we've seen politically and professionally lately, for us to approach others with compassion. My view happens to be that whatever we create going forward from here as a world needs to have compassion as a foundational principle. Because if we can't be compassionate for others, we can't work to make the world a better place. The 10th challenge, and this is a really big one for those in the room who happen to be from the States like I am, is the challenge of faith. Can we have faith that it is possible for us to create a better world, a better government, to potentially maybe even elect a better president? Can we have faith that there's a better future coming? It's very easy, by the way, when we're scared or when we're worried about what's going on in the world, to get into this bubble of thinking it's never going to get any better. We need to have faith and hold tight to the vision. Again, this is why this comes after the challenge of vision on the path. Hold tight to the idea that the world can become something that we value again. And that from a global standpoint, all of us can be connected in such a way that we build that together. Without faith, we can't make it happen. If we don't believe that it's possible, we can't take action either in resistance, in activism, in policies, in business, to make the world a better place to be. The 11th challenge, and this one is really radical, but I adore it from the standpoint of where we find ourselves today. It is the challenge of self-love. But what I'm talking about today is something far, far deeper than that. This is not about like self-love through mani-pedis, okay? Just for the record. This is about the radical self-acceptance of knowing exactly who you are, of seeing yourself through the eyes of the people who love you the most, and eliminating self-judgment. If we do not have that radical degree of self-acceptance, we will not be able to share our gifts as fully as we are meant to with the world. To me, this is the turning point, by the way, in the ways in which we have internalized what traditional masculine models of leadership have done to us. Because when we are focused on our flaws and we are seeing ourselves through those lenses, we are not thinking about how we can collaborate and work together to improve the world, to improve the lives of other women, to face the challenges that we are facing on a global scale right now. We're like this, we're navel gazing, right? So the critical feature here is, can you stand in your power and see yourself completely for all that you are and own it? It is the challenge of embodying principles of the warrior goddess. Stay with me on this, okay? Because I know it sounds a little fluffy and woo-woo, but it's really not. The principle of this is one that says we do not have to be one thing. Traditional models of masculine leadership say there's one way to do it, right? It's my way or the highway. You're with us or against us, right? One way of doing things. The challenge for us as women leaders is that we have an opportunity to do it differently. We can stand in duality that says this. Those of you, by the way, who are familiar with Hindu iconography, it happens to be something that I'm fascinated with, will recognize this gesture. And this is the gesture of the goddess Lakshmi. The gesture says, you're staying out here with one hand, and with the other hand is open and welcoming. And this gesture is exactly what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the principle of the warrior goddess. We have an opportunity right now to be ferocious in our leadership, to demand change on a global level that uplifts women everywhere. And at the same time, we can be soft. We can be open, and we can still be safe. This was one I struggled with for a really long time, right? Can I be open and vulnerable and still be safe? Right? Can I be that way in business? Can I be that way in the world? Can I be that way in my intimate relationships? Open and safe? Safe and open? That's the principle of the warrior goddess. And so what I want to invite you all to at this last stage that sounds so woo-woo of the heroine's journey is this idea that if we are able to stay in principles of femininity, great empowered principles of femininity, while also being ferocious in our defense of all that we love and care about, we will be forces to be reckoned with. Now, I mentioned at the start of my talk that we've lost a lot of women's history with regard to stories of heroines, but there's one that we can all point to, and that, by the way, is Joan of Arc. She's famous for one particular quote, which says, "I am not afraid. I was born for this." My view happens to believe that all of us who are sitting here in this room and who are called to this conference and who are being called to new levels of leadership right now, we're born for this moment in time. Because the opportunities that are being presented to us as women leaders are calling us to rise to be leaders that lead the change, that lead us to the next level of not just our own leadership, but actually really kind of, not to be too dramatic about it, the next incarnation of humanity. We are needed to rise, to give voice to it, to create, to envision, to live through it, and to lead it. And that is what the principle of the new Heroine is all about. I'm not afraid. I was born for this. Awesome. Thank you so much. Welcome.